Hey everybody, we're going to make a main menu for our game. So by the end of the video, you will have a main menu map where if you hit play, we can have a game title. You saw a really quick intro animation. You can hear button sounds, hovers and clicks. You can see exit animation, go back, and we'll have a camera fade. You're not hearing the music right now because I have it muted. We can play the game or we can quit. So if we play, it'll fade. Go into our game, and that is our intro main menu. And we'll cover all the little stuff on how to customize that as we build it. Okay, so we have our game. It's a simple prototype, but we've gotten far enough along that I want to start creating a main menu. So when I open it up, I can navigate into my game, or I can quit, or I can see some other instructions or so forth. We want to build that initial structure. So the first thing I almost always recommend you do before you start building any kind of UI is find some reference. I'm not going to match this exactly, but the things that I like about this main menu are the buttons off to the side and the camera looking at the game world. So you can see some movement and things. We're not going to just put a flat image on the background. I want to render it from a camera and put my UI on top. We'll do some button highlighting and other things. So find a reference for the main menu that you want to create, but I'm going to base mine loosely off of this. All right, so our main menu is going to be a separate map. So let's just do that. We're going to say File, New Level. Now you could choose Empty Level, but because I want to actually render a background, I do want some kind of lighting in my background. So I'm going to choose Basic and hit Create. This will allow me to decorate my background scene however I want. So once you have this opened up, I'm going to save it. So let's do Save Current Level As. I'm going to navigate to this game folder that I created in previous tutorials, but you can save it wherever. And make a new folder called Maps. And inside of Maps, I'm going to call this Main Menu and hit Save. Okay, so we have our main menu level. It is pretty much empty except for our default lighting and our floor. We can always decorate it later. And we have it saved. Now what I need to do is I need to go into my project settings. So edit, project settings. And I want to make sure that this main menu is the first thing that opens up whenever I actually run my game. I don't want it to go straight into the game where I'm playing my character. When I double click my executable, I want it to go into my main menu. So that's going to be my game default map. Go over here and click the drop down, find main menu, just type in main, you should see it. Make sure this is set and then close out and you should be ready to go. So we can start customizing our main menu. And then whenever we eventually build out our game and run it, it will open straight into this main menu that we're customizing. Now that I have my main menu, I want to make sure that when I hit the play button, I don't actually go into my game and start moving around, right? I just want it to show my buttons and allow the player to click. So we're going to clear some stuff out over here. Let's go to the world settings and I'm going to find my game mode where it says override none. You could do this. I'm just going to assign it to the base just so it goes to the default little ghost character, which is fine. And we're going to lock that down and make sure that we can only receive input. You could make a special menu player controller, but that's a little overkill for this tutorial. For now, we just want to be able to click buttons and not move our character. So I assigned my game mode base, it's just the default. And the next thing I'm going to do is inside of my level blueprint. So open level blueprint. When we open this level, because this is a main menu, I want to set my input mode to UI only. We only want to click buttons. So I'm going to right click, say get player controller, pull off of that, and we're going to set the input mode. Now, if you type in set input mode, you have options for UI only, game only, or both, which we'll usually do like UI button presses. And if not that, then it'll also process game. I only want to click on buttons, so I'm going to do UI mode only. Now, when you do this, you just have to make sure that at some point in your game, when you want the actual game input mode, not just the menus, you have to set it back. So we'll do that in a second. So we'll plug that in. When this level begins, only allow UI input. And then you can pull off of this again. Let's get player controller and let's set show mouse cursor. What I want to do is I want to make sure that we can see the mouse cursor so that we know what buttons we're going to click. Otherwise, it'll hide it. We won't be able to see our mouse cursor or what we're moving over or clicking or whatever. So we're going to set it to true. I do want to see the mouse cursor while we're in the menu. So compile, save. Now I mentioned setting this back whenever we're inside the game. So in my game, I have a special player controller for my first person character. So I'm going to find that down inside of blueprints and first person player controller. Remember, this one only gets spawned in our other map since our other map is using the first person game mode, right? This one is not, so we're not going to get this, but in the other one, we will get this player controller. So when we actually load our game, we want this one to ensure that we are in our game input. So we're going to drag off of wherever your begin play is. I have other stuff here, so you may have that just at some point during this chain. Let's right click. We actually don't need to get the player controller because we're already inside of it. So we should just be able to say set input mode to game only. So this is what we want. Okay, plug that in. We're just going to set this to self just in case, since we're in a player controller. So drag off and type self, get a reference to self. We don't need to flush the input, but we could. Let's pull off of self. And we also want to set show mouse cursor. And we want to hide the mouse again, because in our game, it's a first person game and we don't want to see the mouse. We're just going to put a reticle in the middle or something. We don't really want to see our mouse moving around. So we're just going to hide that. So make sure that's unchecked. But if you were building like an RTS or something, you probably wouldn't want to hide it. So it just depends. But my game, I want to hide it during gameplay. I can always turn it back on or get it back if I want. So once you compile save, we're going to hop back in our main menu, hit the play button. Okay, we should be able to hit play, not move around because we're not spawning our character. It's just the game mode base. And we can see our mouse and potentially we could click. Now, the other cool thing is we can see these slow moving clouds, which means we're rendering from the in-game camera, which is exactly what I want. And I'm just going to double check back in my other map because I made a change. Let's open up. Let's find our first person map that we were working in before. Double click that. Make sure that everything is still fine when we open that up. And it is. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me go back to my main menu. And once you're in the main menu, you've tested it, you know that your mouse is visible and you can actually not move around, then you are good to proceed. So the next thing I want to do is create a camera that I can work with so that I can position it in the level and build a scene around it for whatever I want in the background. So there's a couple ways you could do this. One thing that you could do that's very easy is you could just move your player start to where you want it and try and angle it. I don't really like that method because it feels a little bit hacky, and maybe I do want my camera to move around a little bit or something. So I'm going to actually create a camera and show you how to set that in your level blueprint. So the first thing we need is our camera. So let's go to our add, and then we'll go to under all classes, you're going to see a camera actor. This is just a very basic camera, nothing fancy. So click that, add it to the level. This is going to be our main menu camera. You can select it and move it around and you can see exactly what this camera is going to see. And what I want to do is position this roughly where I want it. And then we're going to build a tiny scene around it. I'm going to use basic blocks just for composition. I'm thinking about like a little tunnel. Again, I'm just doing placeholder, nothing fancy, but you could always decorate it later if you want. So I'm just going to build a little tunnel, position my camera in it, and have it open with some open space on the other end. So just position your camera where you want it, kind of preview it, and then I'm going to do a quick time lapse where I just make a couple blocks and build it around my camera. Okay, so if I hit the play button, you see that it's not going to actually go to the camera, it's going to my start position. So once you kind of get a rough composition, it's time to actually set the camera. So to do that, I'm going to select my camera, go into my level blueprints. And what I'm wanting to do is in begin play, I want to set the camera to be the view target. So with my camera selected, you click it in your level. Inside of your level blueprint, you should be able to right click and create a reference to the camera actor just like this. And once you have your camera actor over here, I'm going to pull off of player controller, or you could, do another get player controller node, but I'm going to pull off and say set view target with blend. So for this player controller, we're going to assign a camera. We're going to take our camera, say this is our new target. So plug that in. You can have a blend time, but I'm going to say 0 because I just want it to automatically take control of that camera. You can do other things, but I am not worried about any of that. And the last thing is make sure you connect the execution node right there. And now it will set a new view target, so a new camera, to this player controller on begin play in the level. So right when the level starts, we will assign a new camera to the player. Let's hit play. Okay, so now we're on the new camera. And the cool thing about this is if we wanted to animate this camera or something, we could, right? We could do some other fancy things because now we are from the camera and not the player controller. So this is a very good starting point. Again, I'm not really going to decorate my level. It's just going to be a tiny little tunnel. But if you wanted, you could import assets. You could build a little scene around it, and you would get some interesting animations in the background, which is a really cool way of doing it. All right, now it's time to start making our widget for our main menu. I mentioned before, you could make a specific main menu player controller. I think that's a little overkill, especially for this tutorial. I'm just going to do some things in the level blueprint since there's only going to be one main menu, and I think it's fine to just build it that way. So what I want to do is create a widget and then assign it in my level blueprint to be active so we can actually create our menu when the level begins. So I'm going to go to my UI folder. If you don't already have a folder like this, just make one. And I'm going to right click user interface widget blueprint. So just click user widget, WBP underscore main menu, Control S to save it, double click to open. Now, the first thing I need to do is actually design my widget. So it's always good to start off with a canvas panel. This will just render it to the camera. So I have that. Now, for me, you can go back to your reference at this point, right? Like whatever reference you're using for your main menu. I just want a big title text right here. Long term, this could be a image logo that I could import, but for now, just some text is fine. So compile, save. This is going to be you expand common, you're going to see the more common text elements. I'm going to use a text, drag it down under there. I'm going to relabel this and call this game title label. Usually a label is something that doesn't change at runtime. Like it's just text that is always there and does not change. So I'm going to anchor this to the top left. I think that is fine. Let's position it and make it really big. For my position, let's say 100, 100. For my size, I do want this to take up a lot of space. So let's say, I think 1,000 is pretty close. And then I do want it to be a little taller than that, maybe 150. And none of this really matters because I still need to change my font size to actually get this accurate. So let's replace this text block with whatever the name of your game is going to be. Since mine is just for the tutorial, I'm going to call this game title. This would be the name of your game. And let's make this a lot bigger. So if you go down to font, 24 is too small. You can make this bigger like this. I think 100 is probably going to be pretty close. You really do want your title to be pretty big. It's the main part of your game. But again, long-term, this could be some kind of logo that you import. Go off your reference if you can. Another thing you might want to do is add some kind of shadow, right? Like our shadow color over here. By default, we don't really have one. So let's turn up our opacity on a shadow. So I'm going to turn mine all the way up, my alpha from 0 to 1. And then for my shadow offset, maybe 5 and 5. Maybe that's too big. I don't know. Let's actually make that semi-transparent. So go back and turn the alpha back down to 0.5. Okay, so you see how it was a nice little shadow behind it. Just a really quick way to make some title text pop. Now, what we've done is we've started to design our main menu widget. So compile, save, but we're not actually rendering it anywhere. We have to spawn the widget in our scene. So let's open up our level blueprint again. We are setting our camera, and the next thing we need to do is actually create and assign our widget. So right after we set our blend, I'm going to right click, get player controller, because it controls what gets rendered to the screen, drag off and say create widget, and it needs to know which widget to create. So do the drop down WBP underscore main menu. So we're setting the camera and then we are creating the widget. Okay, and the last thing we need to do, we created it, but we need to actually render it to the viewport. So pull off, add to viewport, make sure it's all connected up. You have the widget assigned, compile, save, and test it out. Hit play. Okay, I think this looks pretty good. Again, you could continue to decorate, but we know that our widget is spawning in the scene. We can click around, we can't move, and this is a really good starting point for then putting on some buttons and other additions to our menu. Okay, open up your main menu widget again. Now we're going to create some buttons for our main menu. So what I'm going to use is something called a vertical box. So if you search for vertical box, drag it down underneath the canvas. And what this is going to do is this is going to help us lay out our buttons in a very clean way that will expand automatically and be perfectly spaced. We don't want to do this by hand and be slightly off in pixels. That would just take way too long. So we're going to create a box that will automatically space them out how we want. So first of all, we want to, again, just align it to the top left, just like our title text. There are other ways to do it, but I think this is a very simple way, just to the nearest corner. So first, it's always good to start off with your position and size and alignment. Let's try 100, 300. I really want it to be kind of underneath my title. Again, you would use your reference for this. And I'm going to say size. This is actually pretty close. So I'm going to round it to the nearest. It was like 580. So I'm going to put it at 600. Just get it close to a nice, even, big number. I think 400 looks roughly the size of my title text over here. It's maybe slightly off, but that's fine. I could reposition if I want. And I'm also going to rename this so that I know what I'm using it for. We're going to say menu buttons panel. And so I'm going to put buttons inside this panel, and anything underneath your vertical box will automatically get spaced out. And let me show you what that's doing. It's going to look very weird at first. Let's go back to our common and get a button. I'm going to drag a button underneath there. See how it's automatically kind of lining it up? If you select your button and you duplicate it a couple times, you see it's automatically spacing it, which is nice, but this isn't really doing what I want yet. So let's tweak this a little bit to get it closer. What we're going to end up doing is customizing one button first and then duplicating it, but I want to see what the eventual layout will kind of look like before I even start that. So if you go to your button, this top button over here, and you look under your padding, you can actually add some padding on the bottom or above or left and right on your buttons. So for example, if I were to put some padding on the bottom button, let's say 15, see how it spaces out a little? Well, if I were to delete the other buttons, like this, and now I were to duplicate it again, they all have 15 spacing. So this looks a lot nicer. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that there's no way to actually control the vertical size of your buttons. At least you're not going to see something over here. There are ways to do this, right? I will tell you it's based off of the size of what is inside your button. It's going to automatically expand. So to really demonstrate this, I'm going to delete these other buttons. I'm going to take some text and put it underneath the button here. So you see this text block. If I were to make this text block bigger, so let's find the font, or turn this up. See how the button's getting bigger to match? And if I were to duplicate this, whatever you put inside the button is going to drive the vertical size of this button. So hopefully that makes sense. So I think what we should do is we should resize our text to be what we want. And you'll also notice that we can control the padding on our text as well. So let's say I kind of do want some padding here, say 15 on the left, 2, 4, 2. Yeah, that's fine. I just want to push it over just a little bit. And let's actually align this to the left side of the button as well. So I'm going to do left side. In my original reference, the button text was all the way to the left, and then the hover effect would go a lot further. I kind of want that effect. So let's actually make our text smaller now. I'm not sure how small. Let's say something like maybe 30. And it's possible that we'll change this later. But now, if I were to take my button and duplicate it, this is a lot closer. And I think in the end, I'm only going to want 3 buttons, at least for now. But if I ever wanted to add more, it will automatically space it down. And I think this is a very good start to what I want. So the next thing that I want is in my reference, you can see how in the screenshot, if I were to hover over a button, there's actually no button image behind it until I hover over, and then there is a very light background. We're not really going to import our own custom image, but I do want to get that effect of highlighting the text when I hover over by having it transparent whenever I'm not hovering. So to do that, let's click our first button, which we're going to customize first. And what I'm looking for is style. You can see that I can define a style for normal, hovered, and pressed. Now you could get crazy with this, but I'm just going to keep this real simple and just do, let's see, a tint on normal. So by default, I want it to be 0 opacity, so nothing behind it. And when I want hovered, let's give it a little bit of opacity. So I'm going to change this from 1.0, so fully opaque, to 0.25, so just a little bit. And then on pressed, I'm going to keep this how it is. I think we can make it full, or we can do 0.5, I think. Make it even brighter. So it's 0 on normal, 0.25, and 0.5. Let's compile, save. Remember, this is only on this first button. So let's actually delete the other 2. So we just have this first one. Compile, save. And if I hit play, see this hovering effect? I think this is pretty cool. And you could be more intense with this if you want. You could import a background image or whatever, but I like this effect of nothing. And then when I hover over, there's a very long highlighting image in the background. Okay, now that I've customized my button, let's actually go in and clean all this up because we do want a couple different actual buttons for our menu. I think I want a play, some kind of how to play or some kind of instructions, and a quit button. So I only need 3. Let's rename this first one to play button. Okay, I think this is a customized one. Let's duplicate this 2 more times. So Control D, Control D. The second one we will call how to play button. And the last one will be quit button. Okay. And it's also a good idea to relabel the text underneath those buttons as well. So we'll call this play button text, how to play button text, and quit button text. Now, just because I labeled these doesn't mean that the text inside of them change. So make sure you click on the play button text. Let's replace the content text with play. Let's do the how to play button text and replace that one with how to play. And then the quit button, quit. Okay, play, how to play, quit. And if I did everything correctly, then I should be able to go and test it in the game. I should see all my hovers and all my buttons, play, but nothing's going to happen when I click yet. I haven't added any functionality. I just have some hovering effects. But I think this is pretty cool for a starting point. Obviously, you could continue to customize this, import images, tweak the colors. You can make this like a light blue instead of a gray, or fully opaque, or whatever you want, really. This is just to give you a starting point. So the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to switch out between menus. So I have my main menu, but if I click how to play, I want to open up a different menu, have it pop up and give me more instructions. Maybe I can go back by hitting a back button and then return to the main menu. So basically sub-menu navigation. And one way that we're going to handle this is with something called a widget switcher. So go back to your designer. And what I'm looking for is widget switcher. Let's click up here, type in widget switcher. Okay, you see it right here. Let's drag one of these down. I'm going to put this in the canvas panel. And the reason is because my menu buttons panel is going to be one of my widgets. I want to keep my title text. I just want to switch this part of my panel. Depending on what you want to switch, you may want to group all that together. Like if you did want to switch this top part as well, that entire menu, whatever you're looking to turn off and on, you want to be underneath your widget switcher. So my menu buttons panel right here, I'm going to drag this under my widget switcher like that. And you see how it's going to like resize it and put it off in the corner. That's because I didn't customize my size before I made it a child. So let's actually undo that and show you a better way. I'm going to take my widget switcher and roughly make this the same size before I do my child parent. It's about the same size. We could make this exact if we want. Maybe we select our menu buttons panel, copy this, copy all properties, go down to our widget switcher, could paste it, right? So now it's the exact same, which is great. And then we take our menu buttons panel, put it underneath, and now we don't have it all smushed in the corner. Okay, so we have our menu buttons panel. So let's come back up here and do vertical box. Okay, we'll do a new vertical box, make it a child. So now it's roughly the same size. And what I want to do is first I want my title label. So my how to play, like what is the name of this menu? Let's get some text, put some text in there. And remember, my vertical box is going to stack all of my elements one after the other. So let's take my text block. We'll call this how to play label. Change the content to be how to play. You could do some other fancier things with that. Like, again, you could add some kind of shadow. So maybe we select this and we go to 0.5, give it a shadow, maybe 3, right? For title text, actually like 2 better. For anything with a title label that's meant to be very important, sometimes a drop shadow can help it pop out. Let's add another text block underneath that. So drag it to vertical box. And now it will stack it underneath it. This is where I would put the controls for your game. So something like, let's go to my content. Let's say WASD movement. Maybe I do Shift Enter to do a line break, space, jump, Shift Enter to do another line break, escape, exit, left mouse button. We don't know yet. Maybe a weapon, not really sure. Press Enter. And now we can actually put our controls right there. Now, what I don't like is it's the same emphasis and boldness of the how to play. So let's actually take away the bold. Let's make that regular. I think it's good. Let's make it a little bit smaller. So maybe 18. And let's add some padding. We can't manually position this right now since it's in a vertical box. We would have to do this with the padding at the top. So let's go to our how to play and padding below, let's say 15, all right? And it spaces it out just enough. You could, again, continue to tweak this. I actually think I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. I don't know why it's back up at 23. Let's put this at 18. There we go. I like the look of that a little bit more. And I'm gonna duplicate this again, because I want to put one more thing down here. I want to give a win objective. Whatever your game is, reach the end of the level without losing all of your health. That's a pretty common objective. And again, you want to add some padding. So we'll do 15 on the bottom of this one, or you could do it from the top on the one beneath it, either way. And the last thing that I want is I want a button to go back to the previous menu. Now you could put this button in various places. I'm going to put mine at the bottom of my vertical box, but you could, put it somewhere else if you want. Just make sure that if you do it that way, that your vertical box and your button are grouped under a different thing that's under your widget switcher, because you don't want to leave the button on and only switch between the vertical box and the other menu, right? Like you can see what's going to happen here. You want to make sure the button is somewhere underneath here, and you may need to regroup things if you don't want it stacked like this. So anyways, I'm going to have my button as part of my vertical box. So I'm going to put it down here. And so let's get a button in our palette, get a button under the vertical box. Okay, go back. I don't know why it switched there. We want some text for the button. Pull that in. You can see I'm moving a little bit faster as we get more comfortable. And let's change the content of our button text, actually. Change that to back. Let's add some padding. So on the thing above it, the reach the end, let's do padding on the bottom. Now, this is where you can spend forever just doing layout tweaks. You can, I'm not going to do this, but one thing I am going to do is I'm going to pull the button over to the left side. So one thing I can do is my button, my right padding, I'm going to give a padding of, let's say 500. You see how it pulls the button? It adds this padding right here. I think that's maybe a little bit too much. Let's go 400. Okay, that's pretty noticeable. That's good. Now I'm going to do the same thing with my hover effects on my button. So we'll do normal. Tint is 0 alpha. I don't want to see it. Okay, we'll do hovered. I think we did 0.2 alpha, 0.25. Okay, and my pressed, I think we did 0.5. So on the tint for that, 0.5. All right, so it's going to stack it underneath. I actually do want a little bit more space here. So the last thing I'm going to do is padding. So we had 15 on the bottom. I'm going to add 15 on the top for the actual item. We'll space it out even more. Click reach the end, 15 on the top and 15 on the bottom for all of these. Oh, not the left, sorry. The top, 150 either, 15, okay. And then back, the button, not the text. On the top, we're gonna do 15. Okay, it spaces out just enough that I think that feels a little bit better. Let's compile and save. Okay, so now that we have this layout here, you can see what would happen if you switch between the two, right? This is intended, but we need to add the functionality to use the widget switcher to switch between the buttons. So it may seem a little bit overwhelming to think about how you would do this, but it's actually pretty simple with a widget switcher. If you click on the widget switcher and you look over here down on active widget index, 0 is the first item underneath your widget switcher. So 0 is our menu buttons panel. And 1 would be our vertical box. Let's relabel that to be how to play panel. Okay, that's a little better. If I select my menu buttons panel and then I click my widget switcher and do 0 index, it's 0. But if I change this to 1, you can see how it switches it. 0, 1. So I want to do this in code. Now, think about what you're really trying to do here. I'm going to put it back at 0. What I'm really trying to do is say, if I click this button, then I want to switch my index switcher to 1, right? So if I click the how to play button, I want to switch that to 1. Then if I press the back button, I want to switch this back to 0. Well, we can do that with button events. So click on your how to play button right here. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see some events that we have access to. And one of them is on clicked. So when the player clicks this button, what do we want to happen? So click the little plus button. On clicked for how to play, I want to access the widget switcher and I want to set the active widget index. So we can pull off our widget switcher. We probably should have renamed this. We still can, but I think it's fine for now. Pull off of my widget switcher and we can say set active widget index. The function, you could probably control it directly, but this is likely more efficient. So widget index. And we can run the function and say, what is the new index we want? Well, if we click the how to play button, we want it to be 1, right? Because that's the second item. If we go back to our designer, our how to play is 1 and this one's 0. So when we click how to play, it'll set the widget index to 1. If we click the back button, let's click the back button right here. Remember the button, and we probably should have labeled that as well. We'll call this how to play back button. Let's F2, Control C for the text underneath, Control V, text. Okay, so click on the how to play back button and scroll down to the very bottom and say, when we click the back button, we want to, you can just copy paste this, or you can get access to any of the important elements that we would want to script on over here under the variables. It's just easy reference to these components over here, but our widget switcher, we could drag it in, get, or you could Control C, Control V from up there. And actually this would have been way faster. Let's Control C, Control V, select all that, plug it in. When we press the how to play back button, change the index to 0. Okay, so we're just returning it to 1 and then we're turning it back to 0 on these two different button presses. Compile, save, and hopefully that makes sense, but it's pretty easy with a widget switcher. If you had even more widgets, you could make, other ones underneath that. You could have even more menus to switch between, but you just need to set the proper index at the right point in time. So on the right button press. So let's compile, save. I think it should work. Let's actually try it out. We'll hit play. If we click on how to play, switches, great. Instructions, hit back, it goes back. And our other buttons aren't functional yet, but we are already learning how we can do submenus inside of our main menu. Okay, now let's make our play button and our quit button functional. Let's come back into our widget. When I click the play button, what I really want to happen is to load a certain map. And in my case, it's going to be the first person map. Yours might have a different name. Yours might be a different map, just whatever it is. Find the map that you want to load when you press the play button. And we want to call a function that opens that map by a certain name or by a certain asset. So let's go back into our widget, click on the button. So for play, let's select the button there, scroll down to the bottom, go to on clicked, the little plus button. When we press the play button, we want to, let's right click, say open level. Now you can do by name or by reference. So if you do by name, you have to type in the level name exactly. You could do that, it's pretty common, but I'm gonna do open level by object reference. So now we can actually select an asset, so an actual map file inside of our content browser. This way we just don't mess up the spelling of our name. So I'm going to select my first person map. I believe that is the correct one. Let's plug it in. Again, your map might be a different one. Whatever you want to happen when you press the play button, choose a map to load. So compile, save. Let's try it out. Hit play button, play, and it loads on our map. Okay, great. We don't have a way to go back yet. We'll, tackle that maybe at a future point, but we still need the quit button to work as well. So let's go back into our designer. Now, when we press the quit button, we want to exit the entire program. Usually your main menu is the starting point of your program. Well, if we press quit on the main menu, we want to exit out. Like we want to completely close it all down. Click on your quit button, scroll down to the bottom, go to on clicked, hit plus. And when I press the quit button, I just want to quit. So I'm going to right click, type in quit game. Okay, and in the case that this were eventually a multiplayer game, a specific player can quit. Like you might have different players join and quit a particular game session. I'm not really planning on having that, but just to show you, you can drag off to the specific player and say get owning player. So whatever player owns this widget, that's the one that pressed the quit button. So we're gonna quit and that should be fine. Okay, so we can compile, save, hit play, we can load our game, we can how to play, and we can quit. And if I were to build this out, this would actually exit the entire game. But right now I'm an editor, so it just exits the editor. One quick thing I wanted to show you, just in case any of you have a bug or in case you want to protect yourself later. Since we are setting the input mode to UI only right here, in most cases, we wanted that to be the game. So when we quit, it might be a good idea to actually set the input mode back or when you open another level. So instead of doing open level like this, what you could do is you could say get player controller. We can just set our input mode back to game mode, the input mode, game only. Pull that up, connect it. Sometimes it can be a good idea to clean up after yourself if you set it somewhere else. Let's also pull off and say set show mouse cursor just to make sure that we hide it whenever we go into the game in case they forget to put it inside of the other blueprints. They show mouse cursor, keep it unchecked for hidden, and then we open the level. So this is something you could do like if your mouse cursor was inconsistent. In your main menu, you can just reset it back so that you don't have to remember to set the game mode in every other level you make. You really wouldn't want to work that way. So we'll set it back to how we had it, and then we'll open the level, compile, save. So that might help solve any bugs that pop up later. So one thing I don't like about our main menu is when I hit play, if I were to hit the play button inside of my menu, it's going to instantly jump into the game. Watch. It instantly jumps in, which is great for just getting into the game, but it feels kind of abrupt and jarring. So what I would like to do is I would like to fade out my camera over a small amount of time and go into the game without it being sudden. So to do that, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but one way you could do that is at the moment that we press the play button, you go over here, we can find our play button. We're going to, instead of opening the level, let's just wait for a second. I'm going to disconnect this. We can get the player camera manager. We can pull off of that and say start camera fade. Now what this will do is it'll animate the camera alpha. So we can be full black to transparent or transparent to full black. If you hover over, it'll give you some hints on what this is doing. But we're starting at 0, meaning we can see everything, and fading to black, which will be 1. And over a duration, 1 second, we'll do a 1 second fade. We're going to fade to black, so we'll leave our color to black. Let's also fade the audio. We'll handle music in a second. And let's also hold when we finish so it doesn't pop in and out, like we don't get this weird screen flicker. Let's connect that up. So this should fade the camera over 1 second. But then what I want to do is I want to hold just slightly longer and then load the level. So we have a 1 second fade, but as soon as we trigger this node, we're immediately still going to load the level. So we actually do need to wait. I'm going to pull off of this and say delay. So we're going to pause our execution here. We need to wait the 1 second fade, and then I'm going to actually wait another 0.5. So we'll say 1.5 total. So start the fade, wait for 1.5 seconds, and then load the level. So connect that in. So let's compile, save, and see how that looks. Hit play. We'll hit the play button. Okay, so that's a little bit better. And you could actually add a fade when you enter the level if you want. I don't really want to worry about that right now. I just want a good main menu for the moment. Let's go back. And the other thing you can do is you can add some background music to your game. So there are a lot of ways to do a dynamic music player. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to play music from the level. Since we only have one main menu, I think this is fine. But again, if you had a more robust music system, this is where you would just hook into that. So I'm going to find a looping music cue. You could either import your own, or for me, just for testing, I'm going to find the starter music with the starter content. Well, let's find it down here. I don't remember what it's called. Scroll down, starter music. Okay, we're going to grab the cue, just drag it into the scene. And the cue should already be set up to play it appropriately. A lot of times I like to zero out these kind of things though. So 0, 0, 0, play at origin. It's pretty good. All right, one thing I want to check, let's actually rename this to music player so we know what it is, what it's doing. And let's scroll down, make sure it's auto activate. That is what we want. And let's hit the play button. Okay, so we hear it. And let me show you something else. If we come back into our blueprint, over here with our camera fade, when we clicked should fade audio, this should also fade our music out when we hit the play button. So let's try it. Goes in. Sounds really nice. That camera fade and the music fade does add a whole lot. It seems kind of subtle, but all these kind of polished details go into a good feeling main menu. Okay, another detail that is kind of subtle, but I think very important is button sounds. And we can actually do some button sounds very quickly and easily. We can do a button sound when we press and when we hover. Most games have both, and sometimes it's really subtle, but we're going to put both in there, like a hover sound and a press sound. And I'm going to use some just simple built-in sounds. You could obviously make your own and import them. That would be good practice, but I'm just going to select some just for testing. So if you click on a button, let's say my play button, and if you look to press sound, we can select a different sound. That would be a little intense. So one that I found is called selection changes, just a built-in editor sound. Again, you could make your own. Let's hear what that sounds like. Right, very subtle. And then my hover, you want to be even more subtle. I think one that I found was Gizmo, and I'll click. And you'd eventually want to replace these, right? Right, even more clicky. Okay, so it seems kind of subtle. Let's actually do that for all our buttons. We don't have very many, so we could probably copy paste that, but I'm just going to type it in since it's really not that much work right now. So selection changes, Gizmo. I'm probably going to time lapse this while I do the last two buttons. Okay, and the important thing I wanted to mention about the back button, a lot of times when we are undoing something or we are going backwards, we may want a slightly different sound for that, kind of like a cancel sound. So I'm going to do a slightly different sound for the back button. So we're still going to keep the hover. So for the hover, we'll do a Gizmo and I'll select it. But for the press sound, for this one, I found something called object snaps to grid. Okay. So this one, it's kind of a little downwards, but it should sound different enough that it communicates we're going back. We're not confirming something. So you could customize this more, but once you have all the button sounds allocated, let's test it out. Okay, that feels a lot better. You see? Hit the play button. All right, okay, it's coming together pretty well. Button, click, sounds, and hover sounds just add so much. It does not take very long to add, and it adds a lot of game feel to your game. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a few subtle menu animations. This does not have to be complex, but maybe some slight fading in or a popping in or a sliding in or any combination of those. It adds a whole lot rather than having the menu just pop in like that. It's a little bit too much, and for final polish, we want some subtle animations. So first, let's go through the process. Let's open up our widget, and it's actually pretty quick and simple. If you've never done keyframe animation before, it may take a little bit to understand, but once you get it, you can add animations really quickly to anything in your UI. So first, let's do our title. I think this is a good starting point to learn. So down here, if you don't have this docked, you can always dock a window, right? Like if I close that out, you can always get it back. Go to our window animations, and if you need to lock it, you can. So the first thing I need to do is just create a new animation. So hit plus animation. We could animate multiple things inside of this. It doesn't really matter. We'll call this game title enter. A lot of times I just want an enter or an exit. So we're going to create our animation, and then inside of our animation, we need to decide what we want to animate, like what objects to animate and what attributes on that object to animate. So a lot of times it's position or opacity or size or whatever. So in my game title enter, I really want to animate my game title. Select the animation, select your item, and now we want to create a track. So hit the plus track, and now we select the item, so our game title label. So we have our animation, the element to animate, and now we want to animate something on this. And you see this little diamond with a plus. This will tell you what are all the different things that you can animate. You can animate a whole lot of different things. What I want to do is just fade it in. So I'm going to hit the plus button and choose what do I want to animate. We can see a list right here on our game title label. I want to animate the render opacity. So here's a trick to keyframe animation. I like to move the time marker first and say at this point in time, I want this attribute to be, and then I put what I want it to be, 0. Start fully transparent. Then I'll move it. At this point in time, so 1 second, I want this attribute to be, and then I'll change it, 1. And that's it, right? It's going to fade from 0 to 1. So go here and hit the spacebar. That's our animation. We're not playing it in the game yet. We're just creating it. So let's say that you actually did want to play it in the game. You could come back into your graph and you can play an animation at any point in time. So let's say event construct, as soon as we create our level widget and it is active, you can drag off and type play animation. Okay, and then it's asking what animation on this widget do you want to play? We can look over here on the left, and if you expand animations, it'll show all the animations we've created. Drag it over, say get game title enter, drag it in. You can do some other adjustments, but I'm just going to leave everything else at default. Compile, save. So this is saying when we create our menu, let's fade in our title text, just like we did in our keyframe. See how it fades in a little bit? Pretty cool. Like we could actually make that take a little bit longer. I think that would maybe be a good idea. So if you ever want to adjust, it is very easy. You just take this and you stretch it out. Let's say I want that to take maybe 2 seconds. I'll save, play. All right, it fades in a lot slower. I like that a little bit better. And that's the process. You can pick anything you want to animate. You can animate anything you like on that object. So there's not just render opacity, there's all these other things like scale and position and anything really you can think of. Okay, let's review and let's do another animation. The process for creating our animation, remember, we create an animation, so plus animation, then we add a track, so what is an object with an attribute on that object to animate, so you hit track and you'll add another object. Then on that object, you'll hit the plus button to keyframe a specific attribute. Then you will set the values at different points in time, so you go somewhere, say, I want it to be this at that point in time, move it, and this that point in time. That's pretty much the process. Oh, sorry, the last thing you have to do is then play it somewhere inside of your graph. So once you create the animation, you need to find it and tell it when to play, like on start, on button press, on whatever you want. If you want to play the animation, you can, but it's all right there. So it's a couple steps. So let's do it again. In this case, I want to animate my menu. Let's fade it in and slide it in from the left a little bit. So we'll call that main menu enter. Let's make a new animation, main menu enter. And we created our animation. The next thing is to create a track. So hit plus track. We can either find it here or we can select the widget we want. I want the menu buttons panel. So select that, click main menu enter. And now when we hit track, we can more easily find it. So I want this top one, the menu buttons panel. Okay, so on this, hit the plus button. What do I want to animate on this menu? Well, I want to slide it in from the left and fade it in a little bit. So I want my transform, but I also want my render opacity. So let's do both. First, let's do render opacity since we already did it. So click render opacity. Let's say at 0 seconds, I want this to be 0. And at 1 second, we'll make this pop in a little faster than the game title. At 1 second, I want this to be 1. Okay, so it's going to fade in. Always better to have some kind of fade, even if it's quick, rather than to have something automatically pop in. And let's also slide this in from the left. So I'm going to add another track on this same object, hit the plus button. Let's do transform. So if I expand that, you can see I get access to all these things. I want the translation. And my X is going to be left and right. My Y is going to be up and down. I could pop it up as well if I want, but I'm going to go left and right. At 0, I wanted to start a little further to the left. So I want it to be -50. So my X, I'm going to say -50 translation. It's going to be over a little bit. And then here, let's actually make it slide in a little faster and then continue to fade after we get into position. So you don't have to perfectly match these up. You can stagger them and it might even be a little bit more interesting. So at 0.5, I'm going to have the X be 0, which is our original position. So let's try it out. Slide and then fade a little bit after that. Right? I like how that looks. It's pretty subtle, pretty clean. Compile, save, and let's actually make sure that we're playing that. We're going to do that one in event construct as well. Okay, so on event construct, we're going to start our animation for our title, but we're also going to start our animation for this menu that we just animated. So we'll play our animation for our title, and in addition, let's grab our main menu enter, drag that in, say get, drag off, and say play animation. And that's pretty much it. It's very quick and easy to play an animation. And we'll compile, we'll save. Obviously, you can do some other crazy things like you can do looping. Like if you want something to be pulsing in your menu, you could do some kind of animation like that. So let's test this out. Hit play. See how they both kind of slide in? It's pretty cool and pretty subtle. You could make it even more subtle than that if you want. But this is how you can do a very quick and easy intro animation. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is how to do an exit animation. It's a lot easier than you may think. Instead of having to reanimate this, all I want to do is just play this in reverse, and we can trigger this inside of our graph. Now, the trick with this, though, is that even though we play the reverse animation, if we are switching our widgets, remember, we're turning them on and off, like instantly we're hiding and showing them. So what I need to do is I will need to delay a little bit to let my exit animation play through before I hide the panel. So for example, when we click the how to play button, so when I hit play, if I click how to play, what I want to do, instead of hiding that instantly, I want to wait a small amount of time, reverse it, play it back, and then switch it, right? I want to give it a little bit of time to animate out before I do my switch. So to do that, I'm going to go to my graph up here. And when I click the how to play button, we're going to play our main menu enter again. So I'm going to copy that and paste it, plug that in. But instead of playing it forward, I'm going to change this to reverse like that. So this will reverse it. It will fade it from fully opaque to transparent, and then slide it back over to the left. But I do still need to delay before I switch my active widget index, because this will happen immediately. So I need a little delay node here. Pull that in. You'll have to remember how long your animation is here. I think it was 1 second. So compile, save. Let's look and see how that looks. That's a little bit too long. So I want to show you one other thing. If you did not want to reanimate this, what you could do is you could just make this play quickly in reverse. So for playback speed, put this at like 2, and maybe my duration, I can put this more at 0.3 or something. You could always tweak this, or you could make a new custom exit animation if you want. I just want to show you options. You can control the playback speed, forward or reverse. You can have delays at different times. Let's try that out. Compile, save. Okay, you see how it goes faster? Maybe a little too fast. Let's tweak that just a little bit more. Let's make it play 3 playback speed, and let's delay for 0.5. Okay, compile, save. Yeah, okay, that's a lot better. The other thing you'll notice is that if I try to go back to the main menu, you see how it doesn't come back in, right? Because it is hidden and fully transparent. So what I need to do then is I need to, when I press the back button, I need to animate it back in. So this can be kind of tricky. Like if you may need to restore the state sometimes, like you want to hold it at a certain position instead of holding the animated position. That's the only tricky thing with animations is you need to keep track of that. For now, I'm going to click when I press my back button, wherever it is, how to play back button, right here, I'm going to switch it, or you can add a exit animation for your how to play menu as well. Like you could animate other things. I actually would, because it's good practice. But for now, just to save time in the tutorial, you should know how to do it. I'm just going to play my main menu enter again. So not the reverse one, actually, the original one, main menu enter. You could copy paste it, or you could pull it back over here and remake it. So I'm just going to copy paste. Okay, we're going to play our main menu animation again. So when we press the back button, we're going to switch it back to the main menu, index 0, and play the main menu enter again. Compile, save. All right, let's try it. Okay, I like that. Pretty cool, pretty clean, pretty subtle. Continue to tweak it, and let's do the final one. All right, and we're in the game. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a lot of tips and tricks to make a clean and simple but effective main menu. And you can customize that for any of your games, your prototypes, or whatever. And once you make one or two, you'll get really quick at doing it. But the important thing is that you understand all of the different little effects and things that you can add to it. Your main menu is going to be the first thing your players see. You really don't want to cut corners there. You really do want to make it look nice, set it up, do a nice decoration inside of your level, do nice animations, sounds, fades, all that other stuff. So I hope this gets you started, and I hope that you can come up with some really awesome menus for your game.